Charles had worked as a janitor for many years. Every evening, when most people left the tall glass building in the city, Charles arrived with his cart, mop, and cleaning supplies. He was a quiet man, respectful, hard-working, and always on time. Most people in the company never even noticed him. To them, he was just the janitor who emptied trash cans and polished the floors late at night. But behind his humble job, Charles carried a deep sense of dignity. He believed that no work was small if it was done with honesty. He had one reason that kept him going, one reason he never complained about long hours or tired hands: his daughter, Maya. She was his pride and joy. Maya was not like other children. From a very young age, she showed an unusual love for languages. At just 6 years old, she picked up Spanish from the neighborhood kids. At 8, she started reading French storybooks from the library. By the time she was a teenager, she was teaching herself German, Mandarin, and even Arabic through online videos and free courses. Charles never had the money to send her to expensive schools, but Maya had something far more powerful than wealth: determination and curiosity. She loved learning. Every night, when Charles finished his work, Maya sat at the small kitchen table with her notebooks and dictionaries, scribbling down new words and repeating them out loud. Sometimes Charles would listen, not understanding a single word, but smiling proudly as she rolled different accents off her tongue. Their apartment was small, just 2 rooms, but it was always filled with Maya's energy. Charles believed that his daughter was destined for something greater. Yet he also worried. He knew the world sometimes judged people not by their talent but by their background. He feared that because he was just a janitor, people might look down on Maya and not give her the chances she deserved. Still, he encouraged her every single day, telling her, "Your gift is your wings. Don't let anyone cut them." In the same building where Charles worked, the CEO, Richard Hamilton, was preparing for one of the biggest deals of his career. Richard was a man with sharp suits, polished shoes, and a reputation for being tough in the business world. His company had grown into a giant, and now he was in the final stage of a $30 million deal with international investors. The deal would open doors to new markets across Europe and Asia. Success would mean more profit, more recognition, and a stronger future for his company. Failure would mean embarrassment and heavy losses. Everyone in the company was on edge. The boardroom on the top floor was being prepared for the big meeting. Expensive flowers were placed on the table, the latest technology was checked twice, and the catering team made sure there was fresh coffee and snacks. The staff whispered nervously in the hallways, reminding each other that the investors were powerful people who could make or break the company's future. For Richard, this was more than just a business meeting, it was a test of his leadership. Charles often passed by the boardroom with his cleaning cart. He would see the shining table, the large screen, and the leather chairs where powerful men and women made decisions. He sometimes wondered how it would feel to sit at that table. But he quickly pushed the thought away. His world was the hallway, the floors, the mop in his hand. Still, he dreamed of a better world for Maya, where she would not be judged by where she came from but celebrated for what she could do. One evening, as Charles polished the marble floor outside the boardroom, Maya was sitting on a bench nearby, waiting for her father to finish his shift. She often came with him after her classes, carrying her books. She liked to keep him company and sometimes helped by organizing his supplies. That night, she was reading a book in French. The words came so easily to her that she didn't even realize she was whispering them aloud. A few employees passed by, raising their eyebrows. They didn't understand the language, but they noticed the young girl's focus. Charles smiled proudly but told her to keep her voice down so she wouldn't disturb anyone. Unknown to them, the timing of Maya's presence in the building would soon matter more than anyone could imagine. The CEO and his team had arranged for a professional translator to be present at the meeting with the investors. It was supposed to be a smooth process. The translator would bridge the language gap, and Richard would present his company's strengths. But fate has its own plans. The international investors were flying in from different countries. Some spoke French, others preferred Mandarin, and one of them was most comfortable in Spanish. The diversity of languages was both an opportunity and a challenge. Everyone trusted that the professional translator, who was known for handling high-level negotiations, would be able to manage. Nobody could have guessed that the translator would not make it on time. Maya continued reading quietly, her father busy with his cleaning, and upstairs, Richard sat in his office going through his notes. He looked confident on the outside, but deep down, he was anxious. He knew how much was at stake. He could not afford mistakes. A single misunderstanding with the investors could ruin the entire deal. Charles, of course, knew nothing of the details of the deal. All he knew was that he had to finish cleaning the hallways and then take his daughter home. For him, life was simple. Work hard, stay honest, and protect his child's dreams. But destiny was quietly arranging the pieces of a puzzle that would soon put Maya in the center of a stage she never expected to stand on. That night, as the cleaning lights reflected on the polished floor, Charles looked at Maya and thought about her future. He sometimes felt guilty that he couldn't give her a bigger home, better resources, or the connections that other children had. But when he saw her confidence, her love for languages, and her bright spirit, he knew that she had something money could never buy. She had the power to change her life. He just didn't know that her moment of change was closer than he imagined. The city outside was glowing with lights, cars rushing, and people moving fast. But inside the quiet building, two very different worlds were existing side by side. On one floor, the CEO was preparing to protect his empire. On another floor, a janitor was teaching his daughter the value of hard work and dreams. These two worlds were about to collide in a way that would surprise everyone and prove that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. The day of the big meeting arrived. The entire office building buzzed with nervous excitement. Staff members rushed around, making sure everything was perfect for the international guests. The glass doors were polished until they sparkled, the conference table was neatly arranged with bottled water and folders, and the catering team carefully set trays of fresh fruit and sandwiches. Everyone knew this was not just another meeting, it was the moment that would decide the future of the company. Richard, the CEO, sat in his office early that morning. He adjusted his tie in the mirror and practiced a few lines of his opening speech. His assistant walked in to update him about the flight schedules of the foreign investors. "They're on their way, sir. They should be here within the hour," she said with a smile that was more nervous than cheerful. Richard nodded, trying to hide his anxiety. He had handled big deals before, but this one was different. $30 million was at stake, and with it came the reputation of his company. Downstairs, Charles had just started his shift. He moved quietly through the lobby, pushing his cleaning cart. Maya walked beside him, holding a book in German. She had just finished her classes for the day and joined her father as usual. She loved spending time with him, even if it meant sitting quietly while he worked. Sometimes she read, sometimes she scribbled translations of words in her notebook. To her, every new word was like a key that opened a door to a different world. Charles looked at her with gentle eyes. "One day, Maya," he whispered as he wiped the glass door, "the world will know how smart you are. Not just me." Maya smiled but didn't answer. She had heard those words before, and though she believed in her father's faith in her, she also knew life was not always fair. Talent alone didn't guarantee success. Still, she kept learning, hoping that someday the right moment would come. Meanwhile, the investors began to arrive. Expensive cars pulled up in front of the building. Well-dressed men and women stepped out, greeted by staff who guided them toward the boardroom. Their voices carried different accents: French, Mandarin, Spanish, flowing through the hall like a blend of worlds. Employees tried to smile politely, though many struggled to understand a single word. The tension grew as everyone realized just how critical the translator's role would be today. Richard checked his watch impatiently. "Where is the translator?" he asked his assistant. "She should have been here by now." The assistant tried calling but got no answer. A few minutes later, she returned with worried eyes. "Sir, she was in an accident on the way. She's at the hospital. She won't make it." The words hit Richard like a stone. He froze, his mind spinning. Without the translator, how could they manage? These investors spoke little English, and the technical details of the deal were complicated. Misunderstandings could happen easily. Worse, the investors might think the company was unprepared, and walk out insulted. $30 million was about to slip away, and Richard knew it. In the hallway, Charles and Maya noticed the commotion. Staff members whispered, "The translator didn't come. What are we going to do?" Maya looked up from her book, curiosity sparking in her eyes. She tugged her father's sleeve gently. "Papa, what's happening?" Charles hesitated. He wasn't supposed to get involved in company matters. "Something about their meeting, Maya." "It's not our business," he said softly. But Maya's ears caught enough to understand. There was a language problem. She glanced at her father, her eyes bright with courage. "I can help." Charles froze, stunned by her words. "Maya, no, this is not for us. This is their business. We're just here to work and go home." But Maya insisted. "Papa, I speak their languages. You always told me to use my gift. Maybe this is the time." Charles looked torn. He wanted to protect his daughter from embarrassment. What if she failed? What if the powerful executives laughed at her? But he also knew she was right. If there was ever a moment for her to shine, this was it. At that very moment, Richard stormed into the hallway, frustration all over his face. He was barking orders at his team. "Find someone, anyone who can translate even a little. We cannot let them leave without trying." His eyes fell on Charles standing nearby with his daughter. Usually, Richard wouldn't notice them. But desperation made him glance twice. Charles nervously stepped forward, his heart racing. "Sir," he said quietly, "my daughter, she speaks many languages. Maybe she can help." The hallway went silent. Staff members looked at each other in disbelief. Richard raised his eyebrows, his tone sharp. "Your daughter? You expect me to put a multimillion-dollar deal in the hands of a janitor's child?" His words cut deep, but Maya didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her voice calm but steady. "Sir, I speak French, Spanish, Mandarin, German, and more. I can help you communicate." Richard stared at her. She looked young, dressed simply, holding a worn notebook. Everything about her screamed ordinary. Yet there was something in her eyes: confidence, intelligence, and sincerity. He hesitated, torn between doubt and desperation. The investors were already seated inside, waiting. Time was running out. One of the assistants whispered, "Sir, maybe we should let her try. We don't have another option." Richard exhaled heavily, then turned to Maya. "Fine. If you can help, then do it. But understand this: if you fail, this company loses everything." Charles felt his chest tighten. He wanted to pull Maya back, to shield her from the risk. But Maya looked at him and smiled softly, as if to say, "Trust me, Papa." With that, she walked toward the boardroom door. Her steps were steady, though her heart was beating fast. This was not just a chance to prove herself, it was the moment that could change her life forever. As the heavy wooden door opened, Maya entered the room filled with powerful executives, their sharp suits, and their watchful eyes. She stood at the end of the long table, her small notebook in hand, ready to do what no one expected her to do. The boardroom, moments ago tense and uncertain, was about to witness something extraordinary. Maya stood at the door of the boardroom for a moment, taking in the scene before her. The room was filled with polished furniture, shining lights, and the presence of men and women in expensive suits. The long glass table reflected their serious faces as they waited impatiently. The air felt heavy with tension, and whispers in different languages floated across the room. Some spoke French, others Mandarin, and a few in Spanish. Their voices carried hints of frustration. They had already sensed the delay, and their patience was wearing thin. Richard, the CEO, stood at the head of the table. His face was calm on the outside, but inside he was drowning in worry. He had just taken the biggest gamble of his career, trusting a janitor's daughter to save a $30 million deal. He was still not sure if he had made the right choice. When Maya stepped inside, many of the executives turned their heads in surprise. They looked at her from head to toe, confused. She was not dressed in a business suit, nor did she carry the air of a professional. She was just a young girl with a simple notebook in her hand. One of the French investors leaned back in his chair, muttering something under his breath in French. His tone was doubtful. Another Chinese executive looked at Richard and asked in broken English, "This, translator?" The doubt in their eyes was clear. Richard swallowed hard, then gestured toward Maya. "This young lady speaks multiple languages. She will help us continue." His voice was steady, but his heart beat fast. Maya walked calmly to the side of the table, placing her notebook down. She gave a small bow of respect. Something she had once read was important in many cultures. Then she began to speak in French first, with flawless pronunciation. "Good afternoon. I will be helping to translate so that all of you can understand each other clearly." The French investors froze for a moment, their eyes widening in surprise. Her tone, her accent, it was perfect. Then she switched effortlessly to Mandarin, repeating the same greeting with the same confidence. The Chinese executives, who had been crossing their arms in doubt, leaned forward in shock. Finally, she turned to Spanish, delivering the same line with warmth and clarity. The Spanish-speaking guests smiled, nodding with approval. The atmosphere in the room shifted. What had moments earlier been filled with tension now held curiosity. People looked at each other as if silently asking, "Who is this girl?" Richard, too, found himself speechless. He had doubted her only minutes ago, but now he saw something different, something powerful. The meeting began. One of the French investors spoke first, explaining his concerns about the financial risks. Maya listened carefully, her eyes focused, her posture calm. When he finished, she turned to Richard and the other English-speaking executives, translating word for word with accuracy. Her voice was clear and respectful, making sure the tone was kept professional. Then one of the Chinese investors added his thoughts, speaking quickly in Mandarin. Most of the room couldn't follow, but Maya nodded, waited until he finished, and then translated into English with ease. She even added a brief explanation about a cultural phrase he had used, so there would be no misunderstanding. The executives looked at her with surprise. She wasn't just translating words, she was translating meaning. The meeting grew more intense as the Spanish investors raised questions about deadlines and product delivery. Once again, Maya stepped in smoothly, carrying their words across the language barriers. Her transitions between languages were so natural that it felt like she had been doing this for years. Slowly, the room that had been divided by language began to unite. The investors leaned in, started listening more carefully, and began nodding to each other. Richard watched in awe. He had hired professional translators many times in his career, but none had handled such a high-pressure meeting with this much grace. Maya wasn't just repeating words, she was building bridges. Every time a doubt was raised, she translated it with respect. Every time an idea was shared, she made sure it sounded clear and strong. Her voice carried confidence, and that confidence started to calm everyone in the room. As the hours passed, the conversation grew deeper. Financial charts, legal terms, and technical discussions filled the air. Yet Maya kept up effortlessly, switching from French to Mandarin to Spanish and back to English without hesitation. The executives, who at first looked at her with doubt, now listened to her as if she were the most important person in the room. At one point, a misunderstanding arose. A French investor used a phrase that, when translated directly, sounded harsh in English. Richard frowned, thinking the man was being rude. But Maya quickly stepped in, explaining softly, "Sir, in French, that phrase means something different. He is not being rude, he is simply asking for reassurance." The French investor smiled gratefully, nodding. The tension eased immediately. Richard sat back in his chair, amazed. He realized that without Maya, the meeting would have collapsed. The investors would have left, feeling insulted or confused. But here was this young girl, the daughter of his janitor, saving everything with nothing more than her voice and her gift. Charles, standing quietly outside the door, could hear bits of the conversation through the crack. He couldn't understand the foreign languages, but he recognized his daughter's steady voice carrying through the walls. His eyes filled with tears. Pride swelled in his heart. He had always believed in her, but seeing her in action even from outside made him feel like the luckiest father in the world. Inside, the meeting continued. The investors began to relax, even smile. They asked more questions, and for the first time, they felt truly understood. Maya's presence had turned what could have been a disaster into a productive, respectful conversation. The French investor who had doubted her at the start now leaned forward, addressing her directly. "Mademoiselle," he said in French, "you are remarkable." Maya translated his words with humility, leaving out the compliment, but his smile gave it away. Richard caught the moment, his chest tightening. He realized he had almost let pride and prejudice cost him everything. He had almost dismissed this girl simply because of where she came from. Yet here she was, proving that brilliance could come from anywhere. As the meeting drew toward its end, the investors began to nod in agreement. Papers were exchanged, signatures prepared. What had seemed impossible only hours earlier was now within reach. Maya stood tall, translating the final agreements with the same calmness she had shown from the start. By the time the meeting ended, the $30 million deal was not only saved, it was stronger than before. The investors shook hands with Richard, smiling as they thanked Maya in their own languages. She responded to each one in their tongue, her words smooth, her smile genuine. Richard stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. He had come dangerously close to failure, and the person who saved him was not one of his high-paid executives, not one of his professional advisors, but the daughter of the man who cleaned his floors. When the investors left, the boardroom fell silent. Everyone looked at Maya. Some were speechless, some were smiling, but all of them knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Richard finally broke the silence. His voice was softer than usual. "You just saved this company." Maya lowered her eyes modestly. "I only did what I could," she replied. But inside, she knew this moment had changed everything, not just for her, but for her father too. After the meeting ended, the boardroom emptied slowly, leaving Richard and Maya alone for a few moments. The silence was heavy, but it was not uncomfortable. Richard looked at Maya, trying to find the right words. He had met countless professionals in his life, people with impressive degrees and polished resumes, yet none had impressed him the way she had. He realized she had accomplished what many years of experience and training had failed to achieve. "Do you understand," Richard said finally, his voice low, "just how incredible you are?" Maya shook her head slightly, unsure how to respond. She had never seen herself as extraordinary. She knew she was good with languages, and she had learned them out of curiosity and necessity, but she never imagined this talent could be so powerful. Extraordinary, she repeated softly, almost as if tasting the word for the first time. Richard smiled faintly, then sighed. I've been in situations like today many times, but I've never had someone like you. You saved this deal and my career without even realizing how important it was. Maya blinked, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. She had never been praised like this, especially not by someone so important. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Charles. He had always encouraged her, reminding her that knowledge was a treasure no one could take away. She had learned 7 languages because he had insisted on the value of understanding the world beyond their small neighborhood. He believed that doors could open when others saw the effort and respect behind knowledge. Today, she had seen that belief in action. Richard continued, pacing slowly around the room. I have worked with top executives, professional translators, and negotiators who cost more in a single day than most people earn in a year. None of them could have done what you just did. You were calm, precise, and professional. You carried not only words but understanding across cultures. Maya smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest. Her father had told her that respect was more powerful than money, that listening and understanding could solve more problems than anger or authority. Today, she had seen those lessons in practice. She had not only translated languages but had built trust where it had almost been lost. Richard paused in front of her. Tell me, he asked, how did you learn all these languages? And at such a young age? Maya looked down, a small shadow of uncertainty crossing her face. I learned because I wanted to, she said quietly. My father, he always said understanding people is more important than anything else. I wanted to understand the world, so I learned their words. That's all. Richard shook his head, amazed. It's more than just words. You have an instinct for people. You know how to speak to them, how to make them feel heard. That's rare. Maya's cheeks warmed. She had never thought about it like that. She had just tried to do her best, to listen carefully, and to speak clearly. But now, hearing it from him, she realized she had done something important. The conversation shifted as Richard's phone rang. He glanced at it, then back at Maya. This will be interesting, he said, answering the call. It was the head of one of the investor teams, calling to personally thank him. They wanted to confirm the details of the agreement and express appreciation for how smoothly the meeting had gone. Richard smiled, realizing that the call would be short because Maya had done all the heavy lifting. He handed the phone to her. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she took it. Speaking in Mandarin, she conveyed the gratitude and questions of the investors. Her voice was calm, precise, and polite. By the time she handed the phone back to Richard, the investor had promised additional support, saying they were impressed by her skill and composure. Richard could not stop smiling. He had just witnessed a young girl impress global business leaders, something he had never imagined possible. Later that evening, as the office emptied, Maya and Richard walked through the quiet hallways. The lights reflected softly on the polished floors. Richard stopped in front of the elevator. I want to offer you something, he said seriously. Maya looked up, her curiosity piqued. Not money, he added quickly, though we will discuss that too. I want to offer you mentorship, training, and opportunities. You have a rare gift, and it deserves to be nurtured. Maya felt a rush of emotion. She had never expected recognition like this, much less a chance to grow under someone like Richard. She remembered her father's stories about people who had knowledge but no opportunity, and people who had power but lacked understanding. Today, she saw that opportunity could change lives. She nodded, a quiet determination forming inside her. The next few weeks were transformative. Richard introduced Maya to professionals, business leaders, and experts who could refine her skills. She learned about business protocols, negotiation techniques, and cultural subtleties that went far beyond language. Each day, she grew more confident, realizing that her talent was not only rare but also invaluable in the corporate world. She saw doors opening in ways she had never imagined, all because she had dared to step forward. At home, Charles watched his daughter's transformation with awe. He had always believed in her, but now the world was beginning to see what he had known all along. He reminded her to stay humble, to continue listening before speaking, and to respect every person, no matter their position. Maya carried those lessons with her everywhere, even as her life changed so dramatically. Richard noticed the difference too. He saw that Maya was not just learning, she was observing and applying lessons in real time. During meetings, she anticipated questions before they were asked, translated not only words but intent, and handled sensitive information with care. Her presence inspired respect not only from the investors but also from the executives who had doubted her at first. One day, Richard asked her to lead a smaller meeting with a new team of international partners. Maya felt nervous but ready. She remembered the first high-pressure meeting she had handled, the tension in the room, and the moment when confidence had replaced doubt. This time, she walked in with quiet assurance, her notebook in hand, ready to bridge cultures and languages once again. The meeting began smoothly. Maya translated conversations, clarified misunderstandings, and maintained professionalism. The executives looked at her with admiration, realizing that she was more than a translator, she was a communicator, a problem solver, and a natural leader. By the end of the session, agreements had been reached, and partnerships strengthened. Maya left the room with a sense of accomplishment she had never felt before. As the days turned into months, Maya became an integral part of Richard's team. She continued her studies, refined her language skills, and learned the subtleties of diplomacy and negotiation. Her father's pride grew daily, but so did his awe at how far she had come. Charles had always taught her that respect, hard work, and knowledge could change a person's life. Maya's journey was proof of that truth. Richard often reflected on the day she had saved the $30 million deal. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, a young girl, the daughter of a janitor, using her intelligence, skill, and courage to achieve what many seasoned professionals could not. He realized that talent was not limited by education, background, or status. It could appear anywhere, and recognizing it could mean the difference between success and failure. In the quiet moments of reflection, Maya also understood something important. Her journey was just beginning. She had stepped into a world she had once only observed from afar. She had faced doubt, challenge, and high stakes, and she had risen to the occasion. She realized that every language she had learned, every lesson her father had taught her, and every opportunity she seized was part of a larger story. Maya's life had changed, but her values remained the same. She continued to respect others, to listen carefully, and to approach every challenge with patience and humility. She understood that her gift was not just a tool for personal success, but a means to connect people, to solve problems, and to make the world a little smaller, more understandable, and more kind. The boardroom, once a place of tension and doubt, became a symbol of her achievement. Each meeting she attended reminded her that understanding and communication were powerful forces. She had learned that even in the most high-stakes situations, clarity, respect, and skill could turn the tide. And she had discovered that courage, combined with knowledge, could change not only her life but the lives of everyone around her. As the sun set over the city skyline, Maya looked out of the office window. The lights of the buildings sparkled like stars, and she felt a quiet sense of purpose. She had come a long way from the janitor's home where her father had first encouraged her to learn languages. She had entered a world she had never imagined, faced challenges, and grown stronger. And she knew that her journey had only just begun. Maya's life had changed dramatically since that day in the boardroom. The girl who once quietly swept the hallways, who had listened to her father's stories about the power of learning, had become a key figure in a global business deal that many thought was impossible to save. She had earned the respect of executives, investors, and employees alike, but she remained grounded, humble, and aware of the journey that had brought her here. Each morning, Maya walked into the office with a quiet determination. She knew that her presence was now noticed, but she refused to let it change who she was. She continued to greet every employee, from the janitors to the CEOs, with respect and warmth. She remembered how it felt to be underestimated, how it felt when people ignored her or doubted her abilities. That memory fueled her kindness. She understood that true strength did not come from authority or money, it came from understanding, compassion, and the ability to listen. Her father, Charles, visited her one Saturday morning. He had always been her guide, the man who had taught her the importance of education, patience, and respect. He looked around at the office, at the polished floors and glass walls, and smiled. "It seems like a different world," he said softly. Maya chuckled. "It is, Dad. But it doesn't feel strange anymore. I've learned how to walk in it, how to make a difference without losing myself." Charles's eyes shone with pride. "You've always been capable, Maya. I knew it from the start. But seeing it in action, I never imagined the doors you would open with your own effort." Maya took his hand, grateful for his guidance. "I wouldn't be here without you," she said. "Everything I am, every language I learned, every lesson about respect and listening, it all came from you." That weekend, Maya reflected on the months that had passed. She had handled complex meetings, translated negotiations for international partners, and even trained new staff on cultural awareness and communication. She had grown more confident in her abilities and more aware of the responsibilities that came with them. Every challenge had taught her something new, not just about business, but about people. One morning, Richard called her into his office. He had a proposal that would test her skills in ways she had never imagined. A potential partnership with a company in South America had hit a critical snag. The team there spoke multiple languages, and cultural misunderstandings had caused tension. The deal was worth millions, and the executives were worried it might fail. Richard looked at Maya seriously. "I believe you are the only person who can handle this," he said. Maya nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. She knew the stakes were high, but she also knew that this was an opportunity to use everything she had learned. Maya flew to South America with a small team. From the moment she arrived, she noticed the tension in the air. Meetings were formal, and the participants seemed wary of each other. Maya began by observing carefully, listening to both sides, and noting subtle cues that others missed. She spoke in Spanish, Portuguese, and even a few local dialects, bridging gaps that had previously caused confusion. Slowly, the room's atmosphere began to change. People smiled, laughed, and started sharing ideas openly. Maya had created understanding where there had been tension. By the end of the week, the deal was back on track. Contracts were signed, agreements were reached, and both companies expressed confidence in a lasting partnership. Maya had once again demonstrated her unique ability to connect people through language, respect, and empathy. When she returned home, she was greeted by her father with a warm hug. Charles looked at her and said, "You've done it again, Maya. You've shown the world what you can do." Maya smiled, feeling the weight of accomplishment and responsibility all at once. Back in the office, Maya noticed that her colleagues treated her differently now. She was no longer just the janitor's daughter who happened to be clever with languages. She was a professional, a leader, and someone whose opinions mattered. Yet, she remained humble. She continued helping new employees, mentoring interns, and guiding staff through difficult conversations. She understood that her role was not just about personal success, but about creating an environment where everyone could thrive. Richard, too, saw the transformation in Maya. He had always respected her, but now he saw her as a true partner. "You've changed the way we do business," he said one afternoon. "Your skills aren't just about language. They're about understanding people, building trust, and making sure everyone feels heard. That is rare, Maya." She thanked him quietly, feeling both pride and humility. She knew that she had worked hard to get here, but she also knew that her father's teachings, her own curiosity, and the opportunities given by Richard had all played a role. Maya's story began to inspire others in the company. Employees who had once felt overlooked started believing that their efforts mattered, that their voices could be heard. Maya became a symbol of how talent could come from anywhere, and how dedication, learning, and respect could change lives. She continued her studies, learning more languages and cultural practices, and began giving talks to young students in her old neighborhood. She wanted them to know that backgrounds do not define destiny, that opportunity and effort could open doors that once seemed impossible. One day, Maya received an email from a student she had met during a school visit. The student wrote that hearing Maya's story had motivated them to study languages and aim for a career in international business. Maya smiled, remembering her own journey. She realized that her story was no longer just about her. It was about inspiring others, about showing that knowledge, respect, and courage could create change far beyond her own life. As months turned into years, Maya continued to grow. She became a trusted advisor to Richard, often attending high-stakes negotiations, and mentoring teams around the world. She traveled extensively, learning new languages and connecting with people from different cultures. Yet, she never forgot her roots. She visited her father regularly, bringing him news of her achievements and listening to his advice. Charles, now older and wiser, often reminded her, "No matter how far you go, never forget to listen. Every person has a story, and every story matters." Maya also learned important lessons about balance. The demands of business were high, but she made sure to take time for herself, to read, study, and reflect. She discovered that her strength came not only from knowledge but also from clarity of mind, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. These qualities allowed her to navigate challenges gracefully, to make decisions that were thoughtful and fair, and to maintain the trust of those around her. Years later, Richard invited Maya to speak at a global conference on business, culture, and communication. Standing on stage, looking at hundreds of professionals from around the world, Maya told her story. She spoke of her father, her love for languages, the challenges she faced as a young girl from a modest background, and the importance of respect, listening, and understanding. The audience was captivated. Many took notes, inspired by the journey of a girl who had once been invisible but had changed the lives of millions through her courage and intelligence. After the speech, Richard approached her, smiling. "You've not only saved deals, Maya. You've changed minds. You've shown people what is truly possible." Maya nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She understood that her journey had started with curiosity and the guidance of her father, had been shaped by challenges and opportunities, and had blossomed into a life of purpose and impact. Even as success grew around her, Maya never forgot the small things: the janitor's closet where she had practiced translations, the quiet encouragement of her father, the moments of doubt she had overcome, and the first boardroom meeting where she had discovered her true power. These memories grounded her, reminding her that greatness was not about status or money, but about using one's gifts to help others and make a positive difference. Maya's story spread beyond the company. She became a role model for young people, especially girls from underprivileged backgrounds, proving that talent, hard work, and integrity could overcome obstacles and create opportunities. Yet she remained the same person at heart: curious, kind, and committed to learning. She continued studying languages, cultures, and business strategies, knowing that growth was a lifelong journey. In the end, Maya's life became a bridge between worlds. She connected people, ideas, and cultures. She showed that respect, patience, and understanding were as important as intelligence and skill. She had saved not just a $30 million deal, but countless relationships, partnerships, and opportunities. And perhaps most importantly, she had shown that no matter where one comes from, one could rise, inspire, and leave a lasting mark on the world. Looking out over the city skyline from her office, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The lights of the buildings sparkled like stars, each representing countless possibilities. She smiled, thinking of her father's words, "Knowledge is a treasure, Maya. Use it wisely." She had used it wisely, and she knew that her journey was just beginning. There were more people to help, more doors to open, and more lessons to learn. And she was ready for all of it, confident in her ability, grounded in her values, and inspired by the belief that understanding and respect could change the world.